What's up, everybody? Good to see you guys again. You remember us? I'm Garrett, Jamie over here. Say hi to the people.
Hi, everybody.
I know it's been a while since we went live, probably our last after hours. And so we wanted to go live, and training camp's coming up. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. So this week, we're going to break down the defense and all the camp battles going on the defense side of the ball. Next week, I don't know what day, probably same day, same time, maybe. We will do offense and special teams because we got a lot to talk about on the defensive end. And before we get into it, just want to give a big shout out to Coach Lane, who one of our newest members of Patreon. Thanks so much for joining. And there's a link in the comments, guys, if you guys want to join Patreon with us. We're having a lot of fun over there. Discord is about to be off and popping. So thanks everybody that signed up. And we're going to get into this very soon.
Let's do it.
Okay. I was hoping you would kill a little bit more time, but thank you,
sorry.
Jamie. Let's do it. Why mess around? We've been gone so long. Let's just do it. All right. So we're going to work our way from the inside out. So we're going to start with interior defensive line, go edge, linebacker, corner, safety. We'll go over everybody in every group heading into training camp. So Jamie, let's go ahead and start it with the interior defensive line.
Yeah. So obviously IDL was arguably the biggest weakness on the team last year as a group. And the Chargers went about trying to fix it. They were pretty aggressive in trying to fix it. They made one move that I think a lot of people predicted, which was adding Sebastian Joseph Day, somebody who we know is a lock to make the roster. Day is probably going to play a lot of nose tackle, rotated nose tackle with Austin Johnson. And he has been, at least over the last couple of years, one of the elite run stoppers in the league. Last year, he had, I think, 3 or 4 sacks in 7 games before he got hurt. So he was starting to show up as a pass rusher as well, was Joseph Day. So we know Sebastian Joseph Day, he was a guy who was popular among Charger fans because of his familiarity with the scheme, his familiarity with Brandon Staley. They went out and they did that. And then they added somebody that we both liked when we were reviewing defensive linemen, and that was the aforementioned Austin Johnson, somebody who had a career year last year as a 27-year-old. He seems to be coming into his own. Another guy who creates pressure and gets to the quarterback up the middle. He's not, what you would call a prolific pass rusher, but he does provide pressure. He can get to the quarterback, and he also has established himself as one of the top tier run defenders on the interior defensive line in the NFL over the last couple of years. So at the very top of the group, they've obviously improved that group quite a bit. You would expect those guys to be on the field more often than not based on what they're being paid and the needs that this team had. And then after that, the group has some question marks. It looks deep based on the number of bodies that they have here on the roster, but there isn't a lot of talent that stands out. The other addition in the offseason was Morgan Fox, who I forgot to mention, somebody who can provide some interior pressure. He can play a little bit of stand-up edge, play some 5 technique if you need him to, play a little 3 technique if you need him to. So there's some flexibility there. But other than that, they brought back Christian Covington, a guy who I think played a lot more than what the team expected last year or had hoped when they signed him. Mm-hmm. And he was up and down. I think he wore down quite a bit last year based on the number of snaps he had to play. And he seems like he's probably pretty much a lock to make the roster. And then you've got a bunch of guys fighting it out for the last 2 spots. I think, recent draftee Otuto Ogbonnia, he's a guy who is more than likely going to make the team just based on the fact that they just drafted him. And then you've got guys like Joe Gaziano, Braden Fehoko, Andrew Brown, all kinds of guys. Jerry Tillery,
Ferris Morrow, Forrest Merrill.
Ferris Morrow.
Ferris Morrow.
All those guys fighting it out for what I think will more than likely be the 6th spot on the interior defensive line. After all the issues they had last year, they being the Chargers with depth on the defensive line, I would be surprised if they only roll with 5 guys. I think they'll probably roll with 6. And I think just based on some of the comments we've heard coming out of mini camp and things like that, it seems like there's a legit competition for that last spot, and whoever is going to get that spot is going to have to earn it and win it. They're not just going to hand it out. Jerry Tillery. But that's kind of the overview of the group.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're better at the top and still a little bit thin at the bottom.
Yeah. Before I go on, let's just say hey to everybody. Craig, what's up? Our good friend Craig. Blazing Bolts, hello. Jamie, you want to tell the people who's playing center field for the Padres right now?
That's Estuary Ruiz. He's one of their top prospects. He's a guy who has been tearing it up in single A and double A all season. I think he's got 60 stolen bases across both leagues so far. He's been killing the ball, getting on base, hitting for power. And obviously the Padres outfield sucks. So they
Yep.
are trying to find whatever they can to fill some holes until some guys get back or they can make a trade.
You think this has anything to do with Grisham's angle to the ball the other night on that triple in center?
He's had a rough couple of weeks, to be honest with you. He's been really bad out there, taking some bad angles, making some bad decisions to dive for some balls. So he's been rough.
Really rough. So what's up, Tom, Craig, Blazing Bolts? Appreciate you guys. Yeah. So, Jerry Tillery, Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, and then the rookie Abonia are all pretty much close to locks. And I put an asterisk next to Jerry Tillery because you were talking about how he's got to earn his spot. I mean, he could easily be replaced by one of these other interior guys if they beat him out in camp. The guys like Christian Covington, Joe Gaziano, Brendan Fajoko, Forrest Merrill, Andrew Brown. I mean, the Chargers declined Jerry Tillery's fifth-year option this offseason, which lends you to believe that he probably won't be here past the season. So if you want to get a jump on it and maybe give some of your younger guys some more snaps and some more development, you could, cut Tillery a year early if you wanted to. But in terms of those other guys, Christian Covington, he was a veteran leader on that young defensive line. But like Jamie mentioned, wore down towards the end of the year, was nothing more than a limited role player. Brendan Fajoko, Forrest Merrill were some young guys who kind of flashed at times. Merrill made the 53 only because they were lacking so many big bodies in the middle last year. So he's not a lock. And Andrew Brown was picked up last season and played in 2 games just as a rotational guy, but didn't make much of an impact. And of those guys on the depth chart, Joe Gaziano probably has the best chance to crack that 53 of these younger guys. Really took a jump in 2021. Could be one of those last guys to fill an interior role, versatile enough to play some edge like he did in college. So, the team kept 5 defensive interior linemen last year. So if you think SJD, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox are all pretty much locks, the rookie Tito, they drafted him knowing that he's going to need a year or 2 anyway. So even if he just stinks up camp, they're not going to cut bait that early. So that's 4 guys that you can pretty much guarantee are going to make the roster. And then it's Jerry Tillery who's going to have to fend off Covington, Fajoko, Merrill, Gaziano, Brown for that 5th spot, because quite honestly, we'll get to it in a little bit, but they went so heavy on DBs. They went all in this offseason on DBs. They drafted a lot of DBs that might be the spot that they carry an extra corner safety on that end, and they're going to have to cut somewhere. So do they add a 7th? Do they keep 6? We'll see when they go to the season. But again, and Gaziano also part of that group too, who could slip in there for versatility's sake. But it's really going to be Jerry Tillery's job to lose here in camp. And a lot of these young guys can overtake him if they play well enough in camp.
I don't know that I would say it's Tillery's job to lose in camp, just because with what Staley's been saying, it sounds like they're finally seeing him for what he is. And they recognize that he has not done enough to earn a spot. And they're talking about him being, this is pretty much a direct quote from Staley from early in camp. They're talking about him basically being, quote, one of those guys who's going to have to fight to earn his spot on the team, to show that he's an NFL player. So that kind of tells you how they're viewing him. And then, you talk about him not being at OTAs early on.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people wrote that off as, oh, he trains in Hawaii, it's too far to come over for a couple of days. Well, most of the team was there. And he was the only one who wasn't. Not the only one, but he was one of the only healthy veteran players who was not there. And I think, if I recall, you have some information from your source who kind of talked a little bit about, or maybe referenced Tillery a little bit, right? About being there, kind of expressing some frustration. The team not being there.
Basically an eye roll emoji was the gist of it all. He was just annoyed by the whole thing. So he obviously was not happy, and it was not something that they had planned out. So yeah, that was not a thing that the team had known prior. And he trained on his own, and who knows what his real motive was for not showing up. But yeah, I got the eye roll emoji on Jerry Tillery.
And he also reference kind of bringing in other defensive linemen to try to replace him, or at least get him off the field at some point during the offseason?
Oh yeah, you see how many players they picked up. There's no guarantee that he makes this roster. No, and yeah, Staley mentioned how he's going to have to earn his role, and so with everything rolling into, they're looking to take him off the field. They obviously are not happy with him not showing up. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe his job to lose is maybe an overstatement, but a former 1st-round pick, you'd think have the leg up, but it doesn't look like Staley's going to give him that, give him grace on that going into camp.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Uh-uh.
And I think the really interesting thing is, what is the one thing that Tillery does at even an average level? It's rush the passer, right? And who did they sign after the draft? And what does he do well? Morgan Fox.
Mm-hmm.
He rushes the passer. He's an interior
Yeah.
pass rusher. So there's some overlap in terms of skill level and value there with Fox and Tillery. And I think it really comes down to, so for me, I really think Johnson, Joseph Day, Covington, Ogbania, I think those guys all make the team. So that's 5 guys right there. And then I think you're looking at, like you said, Gaziano, Fehoko, and Tillery battling it out for a possible 6th spot. And it comes down to, what do they want? They kind of replace the pass rush ability that Tillery has with Fox. So are they comfortable rolling with Fox in that situational pass rush role? And are they going to look for somebody who maybe is a little bit better run defender, somebody with some size who can help plug up the middle? If that's the case, then maybe you're looking at a guy like Braden Fehoko, or are they going to look for somebody who is always doing the dirty work and, brings his lunch pail, so to speak, every game, and brings energy and effort to that group to kind of redefine what that group is all about? And if that's the case, then I think Gaziano's got a great chance, because he can play a little bit of inside. He, like you mentioned, he can play off the edge. He is a high energy, high effort guy. He brings it on every single snap. And he was the guy when they were struggling to keep depth on the field last year. He was generally the first guy up and on the field when they were calling guys up from the practice squad. He was the guy that was coming up to fill that spot and getting the bulk of those snaps. So it seems like he's got an in with the coaching staff. We'll see what happens. But if somebody's going to beat out Tillery, I would say it's probably going to be Gaziano, but I could certainly see Fehoko doing it just from a run stuffing perspective.
So you think that Covington makes it and he's a lock to make the roster? Because I think he's part of the. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, we're going to do our 53s coming up sometime soon, I'm sure. I'm sure we'll do many different versions of that. So let's go on the outside and talk about edge. So of this group, you got the newly acquired Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa as the starters. Chris Rumph is in. He improved throughout last year. And Morgan Fox / Kyle Van Noy will probably join this group at times, not listed in this group, but, Fox will be inside, will be able to kick outside. Van Noy will be a coverage linebacker, also kick to the edge like he's done. So those guys are part of it, but not part of this group that we're mentioning now. The at the bottom of the depth chart is the former 6th-round pick, Emeka Egbule, who's been playing his plays kind of like declined throughout since he's been drafted since 2019. He's been a special teams guy, hasn't consistently performed there either, but special teams is where he's going to need to make an impact if he's going to earn that kind of 4th roster spot as an edge guy. They picked up Jamal Davis, who is an interesting edge guy to watch in camp. High-end athlete who went to the CFL route after bouncing around a few teams' practice squads. He was a standout for the Alouettes as a stand-up rusher. He's also got good get-off and bulked up as a power rusher. And then there is the UDFA Ty Shelby, who's also interesting, a converted basketball player plus athleticism. He's a snap guesser as a pass rusher and wins with speed. He's got a chance to get maybe one of those last edge spots, but probably could be a practice squad stash as well, because just the lack of depth there. You've got Jamal Davis, Ty Shelby, who could easily leapfrog Emeka Egbule, who's not guaranteed to be the 4th edge, but you've got Bosa, Mack, and Rumph all guaranteed spots there as the 3. They kept 4 last year. Do they leave this group a little naked, so to speak, with 3 guys on the roster when you know that Van Noy and Fox could rush and you've got 3 on paper, but technically 5 rushers? Or do you keep a guy like a Boulay or one of these younger guys, Shelby or Davis? That's going to be a big storyline going into camp.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how they list Fox and Van Noy. Right now, if you look at
Yeah.
their depth chart on the website, Van Noy is listed as an outside linebacker. So he's technically listed as part of the edge group right now. Wouldn't be too hard to see him going into the season listed as an edge and have them move him around from edge to middle linebacker to help fill in some gaps and play some coverage and rush the passer there. Right now, as the depth chart looks, it looks to me like you're looking at, Bosa, Mack, Van Noy, and Rump as the edge players. I think Jamal Davis is a guy who seems really interesting to me. 6'4", 250, really long. You mentioned he's a high-end athlete. I think he had a really good RAS score, somewhere up around 9.5 when he came out in the draft in 2021. Went to the CFL, came back on a futures deal. He's a guy who they seem to be really high on. And certainly if they decide they want to list Van Noy as a linebacker or, kind of get creative with how they list him on the roster.
Yeah.
Davis is a guy who could sneak into that 4th spot, but you would think just based on the way they kind of ran out of gas at edge last year, they had some issues with Fackrell staying on the field. They had some issues with Uchenna Nwosu at times. You would think they'd want some experience in that 3rd edge spot, which would lead me to believe that Van Noy probably will be listed as an edge, but we'll see. They're certainly shooting for some versatility, having that kind of amoeba defense where you're not really sure where guys are playing, flexible roles, flexible positions. So they could go any direction with Van Noy, but Davis is a guy that I would certainly keep an eye on. Just if they decide to carry an extra, maybe they decide to carry 5 edge guys or whatever. That Jamal Davis guy seems like he's interesting just based on the athletic profile and the length and the speed, the get off. Seems like that's something that might entice them.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, no, Davis is very intriguing, and I know people love how ripped he is. All these pictures from training camp, everybody's talking about just how big of a shit brick house he is. Brick shit house? Did I say that backwards?
Brick shit.
Brick, yeah. Okay. So you mentioned linebacker. Let's move right on to it and let's talk about these linebackers.
Yeah, this is one area where they were thin last year. Obviously, they let Kaiser White go. Now they've got injury issues with Kenneth Murray. Yep. They are thin in terms of experience, again, heading into the season at linebacker, and there just isn't a lot of talent, a lot of eye-popping physical ability at the linebacker position right now in this group. And I think one of the interesting things is going to be, how do they view Drew Tranquill at this point? Does this coaching staff view him as, a starting middle linebacker, somebody who might have the green dot, be on the field all the time? Is he just a nickel linebacker? Is he strictly a special teams player because they're not sure if he can stay healthy? What they decide to do with him and the kind of snap distribution they decide to go with him is going to have a huge impact on the rest of this group, because everybody behind him is a question mark in some way or another.
Yep.
And it seems like this group was really built not so much with playing defense in mind, but more so with special teams depth in mind. All of these guys, all these linebackers for the most part, play special teams. You've got Drew Tranquill, who plays a lot of special teams and is arguably one of the Chargers' top 2, if not top special teams player on the team. You've got Troy Reeder, who plays special teams. He can blitz a little bit. He's had a couple picks in the last couple of years, so he can cover a little bit. Nick Neiman can run. He can cover. He was one of the Chargers' best special teams players last year.
Yep.
And Ogbongbemiga, he's another guy who played a lot of special teams. The team seems really high on him. We were told during the free agency that one of the reasons that Kaiser White was allowed to walk was because they were looking for more snaps from Amon.
Yeah.
on
Just leave that
defense.
last name alone.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it alone. But anyway, so there's a lot of moving parts there too. A lot of special teams contributors. Not real easy right now to see who's going to play where on defense, especially with Kenneth Murray being banged up and his status for the start of camp not being certain.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw in OTAs there were reports that Van Noy and Reeder were the two linebackers in base. So, in shorts, that's where they were lining up before camp. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting, like you mentioned, where Van Noy is listed. But of this group, Tranquil, Van Noy, Reeder, Murray going to make this team. I mean, Murray had surgery this year, so depending on his rehab, and we'll see if he's ready for camp or the season. We don't know anything about that yet. But, obviously, like Jamie mentioned, team really likes Amin Ogbongamiga. Nick Meeman was excellent on special teams, made some plays with some increased playing time towards the end of last year. Colt Christensen was a practice squad stash, really a special teams guy late last year. Damon Lloyd amassed a ton of stats at IUP, was kind of brought on as a camp body last year. He returns in 2022 for basically the same role and hoping for some development in year 2. And then the UDFA, Tyreek Maddox-Williams spent 6 years at Rutgers, which sounds like my college path. Tyreek actually missed the year with injury and then lost a year with COVID. So he's got an excuse. And also, he didn't spend a ton of time in college because he's a dummy like me. Tyreek won academic all Big Ten 5 years in a row. So he's a smart dude. He's got a good frame, high motor, smart on the field, but really lacks athleticism and technique. So his best spot's going to be practice squad if he can make that. But the team kept 5 linebackers last year. Tranquil, Van Noy, Reeder are going to make it. Kenneth Murray, we'll see if he's healthy enough to make that 53, but it's going to be Ogbongamiga and Nick Neiman there. Could be that 4 or 5 spot. And, if they move Van Noy to technically an edge, they keep an extra linebacker here by keeping Neiman and Onman. We'll kind of see how they kind of flex those players and positions. But this is a group that's really, really good. And this is in terms of special teams, they're really good. So you've got some value there on special teams, but kind of still a little thin here in this linebacker group again. And we talked about kind of storylines going into the season, and there's probably 3 main ones, but on defense, it's this group. This defense, if they can't stop the middle of the field, they're going to have major problems. This is the biggest weak point right now for the Chargers on defense, is this linebacker group. And we had one question here from Robert. What about Mark Webb at linebacker?
I think he's going to be playing safety. He might play some dime linebacker. We'll talk about him here in a few minutes, but he's coming back from a knee injury as well. I don't think he's been working in OTAs or anything like that as yet. So we'll see how he is health-wise, but I think he's going to be playing in the secondary as a matchup guy more than anything.
I agree. I think he's more of a dime linebacker type, but probably going to be safety, maybe a roaming DB there. But yeah, we're going to get to him in a second, Robert. So thanks for the question. All right. So now we move to the outside, and it's cornerbacks. We got J.C. Jackson, the big acquisition. Asante Samuel Jr., Michael Davis, and Bryce Callahan are going to be in rotation as the starters. And then rookies Deion Leonard and Jasir Taylor, who are listed as DBs on the Chargers roster online. We'll see time at safety and corner in camp. They've already talked about that. The rookies, Leonard and Taylor, were drafted in the 6th and 7th round, so their spots are definitely not guaranteed, but I'm sure the team would like to keep them on the roster if they can, or stash them on the practice squad. But either way, Deion Leonard and Jasir Taylor are going to have to fight off these other corners to earn a spot, which are these 2 guys that are trying to crack the 53, Tavon Campbell and Kamon Hall. Campbell had to fill in on a decimated corner group last year. They were signing guys off the street. So Campbell, it was his turn. They called his number. He made an effort to fill in at DB, but didn't do very well. And the Chargers went after DB this offseason. So he's probably on the outside looking in before camp. Hopefully. The other one, Kamon Hall, he's been praised for his work this offseason, his progression heading into camp. So Hall is a guy on the edge kind of here who will need to jump maybe some of these rookies to earn a spot here on the 53. And then the last one of this group is the UDFA Brandon Sebastian, who was the former teammate of Zion Johnson at Boston College. He has a steep hill to climb in this group. In college, he was an average corner, pretty good closing speed and ball skills. He's got really stiff hips, but plays very aggressive. His tackling is hit or miss, but can get there quickly with his closing speed in the run game too. Practice squad is Sebastian's best bet in my mind. So the team kept 5 corners last year. You've got JC, Zont, Callahan, Davis all in, which means if they want to keep 5, you got Deion Leonard, Jasir Taylor, the rookies, and Kamon Hall and Tavon Campbell competing for 1, maybe 2 spots there at corner.
Yeah. So I think, the overriding theme of this offseason, and they did it on the defensive line and they did it in the secondary. I don't know why they didn't do it at linebacker, but I guess we'll see how that plays out. I think the overriding themes here are competition and versatility.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you read, some of the comments from Brandon Staley and the other coaches during OTAs and veteran camp and things like that, they were talking about how when they took the team over last year, there was just no depth and there was really no opportunity to build depth. So they had guys who made the team just because there was nothing else there. And a lot of those guys had to play much more than what they wanted them to going into the season because of illness and injury and guys not playing well and what have you. So they really wanted to build depth, create competition, and add versatility to the defensive line group, and especially in the secondary. And I think when you look at this group, obviously JC Jackson, he's your number 1 corner. He'll be playing outside. He'll more than likely be shadowing the other team's number 1 wide receiver more often than not. And then I think what you're looking at with the rest of the group is really matchup-based secondary play. I think you're looking at, Asante Samuel. He gives you the ability to play outside. He gives you the ability to play inside. I know everybody wants to see him play outside. The coaches have talked a lot about this offseason. They started right after the season was over about how they really think he has the flexibility to play very well inside. So we could see a lot more of him inside in certain situations. Then they go out and they sign Bryce Callahan, somebody who's been one of the better slot corners in the NFL over a long period of time, who can also play outside at times. They still got Michael Davis, a guy who was their number 1 corner last year. Now he's probably entering the season looking at being the number 4 corner. Somebody who matches up extremely well with big tight ends, big athletic, physical tight ends. He's had some really good games against guys like Travis Kelce and Darren Waller in the last couple of years. Somebody who maybe you don't want him on the field all the time, but if you can find matchups for him against certain players and create advantages for the defense, then that's something you might want to look at. And then from there, like you mentioned, I think it's pretty much wide open. You've got Jasir Taylor, a guy who can play slot. He can play outside. He can probably play some safety. He has some return abilities. He was a guy who averaged over 26 yards a kick return in 2021. And they've had him playing gunner in OTAs, and he's reportedly done very well there. So he offers special teams ability. A guy like Dean Leonard, who was a late round pick, little bigger corner, offers you some length. He's a good athlete. Reading about how he's looked in OTAs, he's a guy who's gotten his hands on some footballs in OTAs, broken up some passes. He's been very aggressive in coverage. Then you've got Tavon Campbell, a guy who the coaches raved about last year in camp, somebody who they said had a huge motor, and they were so excited about how good he looked in camp. And to be fair to him, he didn't play well last year, but I think he also played a lot more than what they would have liked for him to play in a brand new scheme last year. A lot like Covington. I think played a lot more than he was meant to play. So he was put in some tough situations, had to play outside. I mean, that Minnesota game with him trying to cover Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Brutal. And that wasn't the only one. There were some other rough games too, some bad tactics. So, and then you mentioned Kamon Hall, a guy who was 3rd on the team in special team snaps last year, and can maybe play a little outside, can play some inside, add some special teams value. Maybe they try him at safety. He said they've been raving about how he looks in camp so far. So he's a guy who could work his way up, entering his 2nd or 3rd season on the team. Second season on the team, right? And Campbell's entering his 3rd season on the team. Normally, and with past regimes, somebody like Campbell probably would have been a lock to make the roster. I mean, that's probably the main reason why we saw Brandon Faison make the team so many years in a row was because he was there and he was a veteran and he was handed the spot. Well,
Mhm.
these coaches don't want to hand spots to guys.
Yeah.
So whoever wins that fifth spot is going to have to earn it. My guess is it's probably going to be Jasir Taylor, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was a guy like Keemon Hall because of the special teams value and because of the progression he's shown so far in the offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to have a hard decision to make with this DB group. They're going to have to be creative in how they keep these guys, especially these younger guys, if they decide to go with a guy like Campbell or Hall on the 53. So Alistair asks, and what's up, Alistair? Saying hey from Australia. Do you see a scenario where Leonard, Taylor both make the final 53? I would say that sorry, Jamie, if they keep making plays on special teams and they can replace Kamon Hall's spot on special teams, I think that's an easy decision to make. Not guaranteed because of how late they were drafted, but they want to be able to keep them somehow. So if it's keeping them on the 53 and then moving them to the practice squad a little bit later, like some teams do when they want to be tricky and keep their players, I could see definitely a scenario where that happens. But yeah, it's possible. It's a kind of an even hunt. I know Campbell and Hall are the veterans, but to me, this is a pretty even field here between Leonard, Taylor, Campbell, and Hall.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's entirely possible. I could see a scenario where I think there might be one or two spots to play with on the roster on the 53, just based on how they shape out with running back and quarterback and some other positions.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's an extra position here or there, I mean, with all the attrition they had at cornerback last year, it would not surprise me in the least if they decided to carry 6 cornerbacks at least to start the season, just to see how it played out. Even if they only carry 5, uh, it's a possibility.
Yeah. And just for argument's sake, Deion Leonard, Jasir Taylor listed as DB. So obviously the team sees some versatility there in both those rookies. So if they just see Campbell and Hall as corners and they've got, a spot or two left open and Taylor and Leonard are more the versatile corners and they can pitch in on special teams, that might give them the leg up on the 53. So the next question before we move on to safeties, Jamie, is what's your current sentiment on Michael Davis's contract? Is it too rich for a high-end CB3 and or 4?
They're not going to cut him. He's due something like $10 million this year, and I think like 8 of it is guaranteed and has already been paid for the most part. So they're not going to cut him. And I think the other thing too is even though he struggled at times last year, I think there's still a spot for him on this roster because of his ability to play against larger, more athletic tight ends, some of those matchup nightmares that you see, and maybe take some heat off of Derwin at times in that role. So he's going to make the team. I think he's pretty much a lock to be the number 4 corner. I think he'll be on the field less than he was last year, but probably more than people expect going into this year. And they'll probably start him off small and hope that he can kind of evolve into a larger role. That it's just hard to walk away from size and athleticism like that in a corner, especially when you've seen him play at a relatively high level in the not too distant past. That's a hard thing for coaches to do, especially when your defensive coordinator is a former corner or a former defensive back. So he's going to make the team. He's going to be cornerback 4 probably heading into the season, but I think he's going to be deployed as more of a matchup weapon is my guess.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's getting cut either. I thought it was a fair deal when they signed Michael Davis, and I think even to this day, it's not even for a CB4. I think there's no real point in cutting a guy when you have a high end depth piece there, matchup piece that you can play in nickel and dime. And I absolutely love the idea of having JC, Zont, and Callahan as your starters in base, but in nickel and dime, having Michael Davis roam around the middle of the field with that size and athleticism. I absolutely love that idea of having him kind of as that 4th DB off the bench and being able to cover tight ends or hanging with, some slot receivers near the middle of the field. I absolutely love that idea. So, no, I have no problem with that at all. And they're definitely not cutting him. So,
yeah. And I think if you look at his deal and you look at how, other, cornerback 3 slot corners, cornerback 3s are paid, most of those guys are making $9 or $10 million a year for the most part. So I think he's in a, even though it seems like a lot of money for a guy who struggled last year, I
Yeah.
think he's in a reasonable slot price wise for what they're likely to get out of him.
hmm All right. So we got one more. Oh, Alistair just wants to say, have to jump off, unfortunately. Has to go back to work. Keep up the great work, legends. Thank you. See you on our show soon, Jamie. You gonna join their show soon? Their podcast?
Yeah, July 25th, I think.
Ooh, all right. You guys got a date. Great. Okay. Let's we got one more question. We'll end the show with that one. Let's go ahead and move on to safeties. Jamie, let's talk about them.
So this is another group that was kind of thin, I thought, going into last year. But it seems like they've really focused on trying to build it out and again creating depth and versatility and competition. So obviously they're going into the season with a healthy Derwin James, which is a huge plus.
Mm-hmm.
Nasir Adderley is a guy who I thought showed some growth last year. He was in position to make some big plays, came up just a little short on a couple of interception opportunities, um, but was right. I mean, played balls beautifully and just got out jumped or maybe mistimed his jump a couple times
Yeah.
and just barely missed a couple big plays.
Terry McLaurin just signed a new contract, and they kept replaying that highlight of Nas right over Terry near the sideline of that game last year,
Yep.
and going right through his fingertips. And I'm like, how does he? I still, after the 15th, 16th, 50th watch, I don't understand how Nas didn't come up with that. But yeah, always in position.
And there was another one, I think, against the Cowboys, if I'm not mistaken, where somebody went up over him in the corner of the end zone and brought one down. He was right
Mhm.
there, played it perfectly. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was right there. And I thought one of the biggest knacks on Nas last year was just not last year, but going into last year was really that he was a terrible tackler.
Mhm.
Could not count on him to be a tackler at all. And him as the last line of defense was pretty scary.
Yeah.
But last year, he became one of their better, more physical, more reliable tacklers.
Yeah.
He showed a lot of flexibility.
A
We
little
talk
bit
all
of
the
an
time about,
enforcer.
yeah,
Yeah.
he became an enforcer. We talk all the time about Derwin, how he can play pretty much anywhere. I think the guy could play corner if you needed him to. He definitely can play slot, dime linebacker. He can play both safety positions. I think you could put him at middle linebacker, even at his size, and he'd be pretty productive. And Naz has some similarities. I mean, he's not Derwin, obviously, but he's a former outside corner. He can play some slot for sure. He can play some dime linebacker. He can absolutely come downhill and chop somebody down as the last line of defense. And I think his playmaking skills are developing. So, having that 1-2 punch at safety is really nice, gives you a lot of versatility. And, I mentioned the amoeba defense earlier in the show. Uh, Having got two safeties like Derwin and Adderley gives you the ability to really move guys around and create some confusion about who's doing what and where they're lined up,
Yep.
just because of the fact that they can play so many spots. And
Mhm.
Naz is a guy I wouldn't mind seeing play more slot. He's a
Mhm.
guy who I've been saying for a couple of years I thought he was best suited to playing slot. I like him in short zones. He's quick. He's got good hands, really good ball skills. So looking for another step up in his game, hopefully, out of Nasir Adderley. And then you talk about JT Woods, a guy who, you know, we initially didn't like the pick very much when they took him in the draft. Went back and watched. He's a guy who he's long, he's rangy, he's got explosive speed. He catches the ball when it's thrown in his area.
Mhm.
He's shown a willingness to be a good tackler. He's not a good tackler yet, but he's not afraid to hit people. I think there's a lot of versatility there. It sounds like they might think he can play some corner. I'm not sure that that's ultimately what he's going to do, but it sounds like at least initially he's going to play some deep safety when they're bringing Derwin down into the box and moving him around a little bit, looking for a playmaker back there. So he's a guy who is a third round pick. He's going to make the team and he's
Mhm.
probably going to play a lot. I'm sure he'll contribute on special teams and play quite a bit on defense. And then you've got Mark Webb, who was drafted last year, had a knee injury, wasn't on the field very much. I think they like him. He could play too high. I don't think you want him playing single high too much. He can play some slot, play some dime linebacker, certainly contribute on special teams. So some more versatility, some more competition there. And I think all those guys push a guy like Alohi Gilman a little bit further down the depth chart, a guy who played a lot last year, certainly flashed, but wasn't consistently good all year. Again, like a Campbell, like a Covington, a guy who probably was asked to do a lot more than what they thought they would need him to
Mhm.
do going into the season. had his moments, but just I don't think he's athletic enough to play where they've been asking him to play. And I think adding guys like Webb and Woods and Adderley, I think it makes it easier to maybe keep him on special teams a little bit where he belongs, and maybe have him play some dime linebacker, but not have him play deep so much. I think that's kind of asking a lot of him.
Yeah. Yeah. So we know Derwin Nas is back. Rookie, actually, JT Woods has been making a ton of noise in minicamp. He's had 3 to 5 interceptions between rookie minicamp and OTAs, apparently. So he's making a lot of noise, doing the best he can with his opportunities so far going into camp. And then you got Alohi Gilman and Mark Webb, who made the team last year. Webb has been an unknown with all his injuries. It'll probably be his last chance to prove he can play really and stay healthy. And Gilman had an expanded role last year, made a crucial interception to beat the Chiefs, but like Jamie mentioned, probably played more than he should have last year. Ben DeLuca was a practice squad stash last year. Going to try to probably do the same since this DB group is so crowded. And then they also brought in 2 UDFA DBs, Skylar Thomas and Raheem Lane. Skylar Thomas transferred from Washington State to Liberty last year. 152 tackles, 6 interceptions at Washington State. Didn't let up at Liberty either. 54 tackles, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble. Really undersized, but is a feisty DB. Might be able to carve out a role in nickel sometime, but aiming for a practice squad spot for sure. Raheem Lane played both safety and corner, plays with good instincts, lacks the athleticism, which was a big part of his move from corner to safety. Lane is a really good run defender, especially in the open field. Again, another practice squad candidate, especially with his versatility. So if the team kept 4 safeties last year, and Nas, Derwin, and JT Woods are making the team, you've got Gilman and Webb kind of fighting out for 1, maybe 2 safety spots there. And to be honest, neither Webb nor Gilman have a guaranteed spot in my mind.
No, I mean, Webb has only been on the team for a year, and this coaching staff did draft him. So you would think they'd want to give him an opportunity to show what he can do when healthy. And they had the green dot on his helmet at times last camp. He's a guy who they were treating him a lot like Chris Harris last year. He was playing slot, playing both safety positions, playing some dime linebacker. It seems like the coaches like him. I don't know that he has a guaranteed spot, but 1 year after being drafted, I think he'd probably have to be pretty bad to get cut and not make the team. And Gilman is a guy who was drafted by the previous regime. He's that Notre Dame team leader, academic star, the choir boy, the Boy Scout that Tom Telesco loves. I've never been a big fan. He should not have a guaranteed spot, and it sounds like they're really pushing for competition up and down the roster this year. So hopefully somebody pushes him and he really has to earn his spot. But I think just right now, just based on his tenure on the team and not knowing too much about some of the guys behind him, I think honestly he's probably got the inside track right now, but it'd be nice if somebody came up and pushed him and forced him to at least earn his spot.
Yeah, Webb probably having the leg up on Gilman at this point, probably heading into camp with only 1 year under his belt. But let's get to these questions and we can close this out real quickly. Robert Medina, does Derwin get extended before the season? We know, Jamie and I know that Derwin, and I guess everybody in Discord knows that Derwin had surgery, and the team is currently waiting for training camp to see how it does, how quickly he can get back, and if he can get back to 100%. If everything checks out, then a deal is coming before the season. If there are some holdbacks on that injury, then it might take a little bit longer to get that deal done, but it is nearly on the table at this point. The next question is from Edward. Jamie, long-time Lightning Round podcast listener, first-time stream watcher. Edward, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Who, in your opinion, has the potential to be the most frustrating player to watch on defense?
I'll give you. Well, I would say Tillery is probably.
Yeah. I was gonna say who other than Tillery, because Tillery's the answer.
Yeah.
Who's number 2?
Other than Tillery, I would say, well, Tillery and Kenneth Murray are the 2 easy answers.
Yep. Yeah.
if they're healthy and on the team.
That was going to be my second. Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty easy answer. All right. Tom says it's 4th and 5, the game on the line. Who are the 11 you are putting on the field for this defense?
Let's see.
Whew.
Can we go? Let's see. I'm going to go. Obviously, we're putting Bosa and Mac on the edges.
Yes, that's 2. Yep. That's an easy one.
Go with Johnson, Joseph Day, and Fox.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's 5.
I agree with you there.
And then
linebacker is going to be the hard one.
I'm inclined not to put a linebacker on the field, but I'm going to say Kyle Van Noy.
Okay.
At linebacker.
So
that's 6. Right?
I think that's 7.
Bosa, Mac. Joseph Day, Johnson.
Yep. Johnson, Fox, and Van Noy. Okay, that's 6.
That's 6.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go, obviously, Derwin, Adderley.
Mm-hmm. That's 8. You got 3 more.
That's 8. And then I would say
JC
Asante
Samuel. And then who's your last DB?
That's a tough one. It'd be a toss-up for me between Davis
and Callahan.
Tough one.
Yeah. I'm going Callahan.
I knew you were going to say Callahan, so I'll go Davis for matchup purposes.
So, and Tom says only 5 DBs. You thought you'd go more.
He was probably figuring we would only have 2 down linemen.
Yeah,
look at the pass rush.
Yeah. I really, really like the idea of having. I really like the idea of having Austin Johnson in the middle with Fox and SJD on either side. Bosa Mac, obviously. I was kind of debating having Tranquil, but Van Noy makes sense. Probably the best coverage linebacker at that point. And Callahan, I would want in the slot more than Davis, I think.
I think in my scenario, you'd probably have Davis outside and Asante in the slot. But
Davis
for matchup.
Oh, got you. Okay, Michael Davis. Gotcha. Okay. Alrighty. Well, that does it. Thanks everybody for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, and we appreciate everybody. Join the Patreon. We're having a lot of fun over there, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.